So it looks like Battlefield 6 is actually going to be adding quite a lot of new game modes to the standard cycle that we have in the game. So currently we've got a good number already, from Conquest and Breakthrough, Escalation. We've got Strike Point, which was added with Season 1. However, it looks like there are a good number that are currently in development, according to a report that was released today by Insider Gaming. And Insider Gaming tends to have pretty accurate stuff. So I kind of wanted to talk about this report, talk about what are the game modes that were mentioned, what are some pieces of information that are kind of the most important to talk about here, and of course, why there are so many people that are pretty concerned about the fact that there are this many game modes and what the kind of common complaints seem to be, because there are some kind of concerns with what Battlefield 6 is doing and possibly repeating some mistakes that were done in some older Battlefield games. So before we do that, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications set to all so you don't miss out on any of the Battlefield 6 content here on the channel, and let's just dive right on into it. So Insider Gaming released a report earlier today that talked about how there are 9 new game modes that are currently in development for post-launch content in Battlefield 6. So last month, Insider Gaming talked about how there's 6 new game modes that are going to be coming to Battlefield 6. 2 of them we already know because one actually released with Season 1 already, and that would be Strike Point, and then the other is going to be Sabotage, which is coming out with the next content update here in Season 1. However, there are a couple more that have actually been confirmed, which are Raid, Payload, Squad, Shootout, and Tank Hunt for the original 6. However, it looks like they have actually added 5 new game modes based off of some data mined files. So some people took a look at the files, and these are currently labeled as prototypes. These are very early in development, but for the most part it looks like, based off of the previous trends that we've had in Battlefield 6 with these data mined pieces of content, that it looks like these game modes are pretty much going to be coming to this game. So the game modes in the files actually do have some names. Currently these look to be more like just internal names, sort of how RedSec was codenamed originally Project Granite and then it released as RedSec. So of course these are always going to be subject to change, but for right now we know that they are called Convoy, Fantastic Four, Gunmaster, Touchdown, and Tug of War. On top of this, of course, there is going to be naval combat based off of an internal file called Glacier, and the naval combat seems to be coming in a later update in Battlefield 6. We did know that they were looking into it, and it looks like it's actively in development. So according to Insider Gaming, Gunmaster seems to be a sort of gun game type mode where the player's weapon changes every time you get an elimination. You've probably seen this in other first-person shooters. Of course, it's really popular in Call of Duty. Usually the last weapon is some sort of melee one. Tug of War seems to be something kind of based off of Breakthrough, where players have to capture flags in order to progress through the map. If a flag is captured, the next flag will push the enemy team back, but can be retaken to continue the Tug of War for victory. So it's just kind of a play on what we've already got, but with a more specific kind of style to it that makes it feel like Tug of War. But obviously this is a lot of content. Now this could be for multiple seasons ahead, it could be for 2 seasons. We really don't know because 9 game modes is a lot, but there is a bit of concern, and what I've seen so far from kind of online reactions are some pretty mixed ones. So there are a couple of aspects to this argument as to why some people are concerned about this. So the first thing I kind of noticed is a pretty common complaint I've seen so far with Battlefield 6 when they added things like Casual Breakthrough, where people are afraid that this amount of gameplay modes is going to split the player base. So we all know that Battlefield 6 is really popular for its core kind of game modes, those being Conquest, Escalation, and Breakthrough. For the most part, that's kind of what everyone thinks of when they hear Battlefield as a game. Now, Battlefield does also have sort of close quarters combat stuff, like your traditional team deathmatch, and of course like hardpoint type games, so there are already a good number of game modes that are in Battlefield 6. When they added Casual Breakthrough, one of the biggest complaints that I saw people kind of talking about was that they were afraid that this was going to split the player base, that this was catering in a way to something that they didn't really think was necessary, things like that. And the reason why people are afraid of kind of diluting the player base across so many modes is because there's a mechanic in Battlefield 6 where if within the first 3 minutes of a server loading, there aren't at least 24 players per team, the server starts to populate with bots. So you get into the game faster and there's bots for some time. However, once there's 24 against 24, the server starts replacing the bots with actual players. On most servers, this seems to be fine. In the North American servers, it looks like it's fine. In Europe, it looks like it's fine. People for the most part are getting into matches with actual players, and it doesn't doesn't seem like the bot issue is really that big of a deal. However, in Asia, in Australia, and servers like that, a lot of players have been noticing that they're just getting stuck in bot-only lobbies, and even though there are a solid number of players online at really any given time, a lot of them are noticing that they're consistently and persistently playing with bot lobbies. Now, some players say that it depends on the time of the day, that at certain periods of time, you just tend to find less players online in some servers, but for the most part, I can say that I've played this game really early, midday, super late. I never really had a problem with getting into servers. So it looks like there are certain regions where it's just the player base is not as big as in other regions. So the concern for those players is that this is going to make that problem much worse because you're already taking a bit of a smaller pool of players and now spreading them out over too many game modes. From a personal standpoint, I don't think having more game modes is a problem. I think that where the problem occurs is the matchmaking system. I don't think that if the matchmaking system was as weird as it is, that we would have an issue with multiple other game modes being in this game. I also think that to some extent, you do need fresh content to keep people engaged and interested, because you could play Conquest every single day if you want to, and for the most part, when I load into Battlefield 6, right, I'm playing Conquest, Breakthrough, and Escalation. I'm not really playing anything else, but occasionally I want to try something different, so I'll play the close quarter stuff. I personally didn't really play Strike Point because I'm not the biggest fan of no respawn things, but I think a lot of people appreciate when there's more content than when there's not more content, and I think for game developers, they kind of have to balance in a way where they're giving more content, especially in a live service game, and they're also kind of delivering across multiple fronts and keeping a lot of people satisfied. So it's obviously not an easy thing to try and balance. However, some critiques that I do agree with are that we do need bigger maps and we need more maps. We need maps that actually can complement these game modes properly, because right now the problem that's happening is a lot of these maps are making some of these game modes not as fun as they could be. For instance, I've been playing a lot of Breakthrough lately, and New Silbeck City is just not my favorite Breakthrough map at all. It feels like everything is too condensed, too small, and just constant, not enough room to really do much. Now, I played Breakthrough in Battlefield 2042 as well, so I see both kind of aspects of the map sizing. I don't think the maps need to be as big as in 2042, but I also don't think the maps need to be as small as they are in Battlefield 6, so I think that if we get more maps, having these other game modes is fine, just as long as we actually get more of the base content to complement what's already there. I also think that progression should be fixed in a way, because getting to attachments is not a very fun process. And yeah, obviously this game lasts for a while, but each content update is going to get new weapons. And so at some point you're going to kind of be a little bit timed out, and it's going to be more difficult to deal with new weapons as well as old weapons that you maybe didn't get all the attachments for. Personally, I think having more content isn't a bad thing, and I don't think that it's necessarily going to split the player base as much as people think it is, because I do think ultimately most people will end up playing the classic Battlefield modes. I mean, even when you go through the UI, the first things you see in your face may be one of the new modes, but for the most part, everybody kind of knows all-out warfare might be the thing that they're just going to be clicking on constantly anyways, or Breakthrough, or whatever it may be. So all of these different modes aren't necessarily bad for Battlefield 6 or for player retention or for player numbers. Of course, only time will tell, but I do think that there are other things that I would like to see improved in this game so that all these game modes actually play well and that the game is actually overall a good, solid experience. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. How do you feel about Battlefield 6 adding all these different game modes? Are you excited? Do you think that this is a solid move, or do you think that they should be focusing on something else? Do let me know in the comments below. Leave a like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That's all so you don't miss out on another upload, and that's all for today, folks.